Tea, Coffee, Murder. Episode 5, The Poisoners Club. Written by Ellen Barksdale. Narrated by Jessica Whittaker. Prologue, in which a dream becomes a vision. "Here, drink this. It will make you feel better," said the woman. She stood in front of him dressed in a long purple robe and held out a cup.
"What is it?"
he asked. "It will do you good."
"That doesn't answer my question,"
he said. "Sometimes no answer is the best answer," said the woman.
"What do you mean?"
"She means she intends to poison you with arsenic," said another woman in a light blue robe. She also offered him a cup. "Drink this. It will do you good," she said. A blue veil bathed her face in shadows.
"But what is this?"
"She brings you cyanide," said a third woman clothed in red.
"Who are you, and what—"
he began, but was interrupted by a woman dressed in bright green. "She brings you strychnine," she said. More and more women came from all sides, their robes in all the colours of the spectrum. They each carried a cup in front of them, and they all wanted to go to him. He turned and ran, but the wide corridor became narrower the further he ran, until it finally came to a point where there was no escape. He turned around. The women were close behind him. There were dozens, no, hundreds, maybe even thousands. They all rushed at him, pulled him to the ground, threw themselves on him to prevent him from escaping. One held his head, another opened his mouth, and then they lifted the cups above him and tilted them to the side until the contents spilled over the edge and— "Ah!" The man started from the dream and gasped for air. He was always glad when the day came, when the nightmares stopped. His eyes wandered to the woman lying next to him, fast asleep. He wondered what she dreamed about, if she had. Chapter 1, in which strange guests haunt the Black Feather. 3 men and a woman were seated together for dinner in the Black Feather pub, chatting animatedly while they ate. The woman leaned forward and told a joke that caused her 3 companions to laugh uproariously. Not for the first time, other guests gave the group irritated looks. Dessert was served. The woman took a spoonful of the caramel pudding, which was topped with a little whipped cream, and nodded appreciatively. "Delicious," she said, smiling at Louise Carton, the cook at the Black Feather, who was standing behind the bar.
"Here we go again," Louise muttered.
"Not another one," said Nathalie. "Look out, here she goes." The woman ate 3 or 4 more spoonfuls of pudding, then winced slightly and widened her eyes. She tensed up and dropped the spoon, which slid off the table and landed clattering on the floor. The woman contorted her face and groaned with pain, pressing her hands to her stomach in agony. While gasping for breath, she tried to say something but could only utter a tortured gasp. Her 3 companions watched with interest but did nothing except eat their puddings. The woman writhed in pain and slipped from her chair. On the floor she twitched violently a few more times, then her head sank to the side, her body went limp. One of the men in her group, a lanky man in his mid-60s with a white hairdo that would have made Andy Warhol even paler with envy, looked round. "Arsenic?" he asked the others, who nodded in agreement. Nathalie was leaning against the bar. I think it's safe to say there have never been 4 deaths in one night at the Black Feather.
Plenty of people died on stage at the comedy open mic last year, said Louise, Ronald included.
I'm glad I missed that.
Nathalie imagined their friend, the local constable, telling dad jokes to a stony-faced crowd. Cringe. It's going to be an unusual event, though I do worry that our regular crowd tonight might be getting the wrong end of the stick, thinking I've gone all Lucretia Borgia.
Well, she was a great beauty, like yourself.
But I hear her caramel pudding was rubbish, said Nathalie.
The white-haired guest called out to the woman lying on the floor.
Debbie, we're all in agreement. We think it was acute arsenic poisoning.
The woman sat up and straightened her clothes before sitting back at the table.
Quite right, Harry,
she said with a grin, and continued to eat the pudding with her teaspoon, as her dessert spoon was still on the floor somewhere.
I'd like to have included skin pigmentation, but I'm quite proud. Indeed, nice muscle cramping. I'm relieved you spared us the diarrhea, though, said Harry, the white-haired man.
Nathalie shook her head.
I'm going back to the kitchen, said Louise.
She hadn't even taken a step when a pleading, "Louise!" sounded from the kitchen.
I'm on my way,
shouted the cook. It was as if Louise had a sixth sense, but then maybe she did. It had once been her job to live on her wits, to predict the next moves of some very dangerous people. That translated well to a professional kitchen, though her management skills were rather more friendly than some.
Your customers are dropping like flies tonight, she heard an amused-sounding voice say.
A guest from one of the back tables placed his empty beer glass on the bar.
Or is it an old Cornish tradition?
The man signalled to the barman to pour him another pint,
feigning death after every course.
Nathalie laughed. She'd only seen the man once or twice in the last few weeks, but she knew who he was. Martin Lazebnik, a lawyer who recently settled in Earlsraven. His pitch-black hair was combed back from his face, slightly reminiscent of Dracula.
Was the bloodsucker look a deliberate and ironic style choice for the lawyer?
Probably not, but it amused her to think so. We do have some quaint old traditions round these parts. Eddie over there is one of them.
Eddie Hogarth winked at her from his usual seat at the end of the bar.
Do you think we should make it a regular thing, Martin?
Well, I was dining alone tonight, and waiting for the next death was quite entertaining. It beat the book I was intending to read.
But I think some of your other guests were less than impressed.
Dare I ask what on earth was going on?
Well, as far as I understand, she began and immediately faltered. You know, I'm not sure I do understand. It had something to do with pharmacists. Wait a minute. She went to the kitchen door, stuck her head through. Louise, is the crisis over?
Everything's fine, Louise replied. Oven number 2 wasn't igniting, but I fixed it.
Martin's asked me about the poisoners, and I didn't know what to say, to be honest.
I'll be right there.
When Nathalie returned, the lawyer had joined Eddie Hogarth and was sitting at the end of the bar. Eddie, said Nathalie, noticing her most regular of customers had an empty glass in front of him, what can I get you?
Nathalie, replied the freelance artist. How long have you been running the Black Feather now?
Since March, so a good 7 months, she replied.
Then you should know by now what I'm going to order, said Eddie.
You can just
pour a beer and put it down.
Ah, said Martin.
But if you don't order anything and Nathalie just puts a beer down for you, there's no sales contract. The beer is a gift to you and you don't have to pay for it, he smiled mischievously.
Really? Said Eddie Hogarth, storing that one away.
That's a good one.
Don't give him any more excuses to dodge paying, Martin, said Nathalie, giving Eddie the beer. Louise joined them.
So, is my expertise required?
Yes, it's about our poisoners. Nathalie wiped her damp hands on the tea towel she wore tucked into her apron.